Hello everyone, welcome to the next session of SAP Basis Training. In this session we will be discussing about SAP Java config tool in detail. So after we have installed SAP NetWeaver application server for Java, we need to do some fundamental settings. In general, these fundamental basic settings are by default it is there. However, we need to do some changes in the configuration tool in some cases, whether you wanted to customize this specific Java server for your needs. So in this particular session, we will see how we can use the configuration tool in detail. Okay, before we get into configuration tool, we need to understand the Java space management. That means memory management inside Java. This is very important topic. We will come to the memory management in ABAP in the later session in detail. Memory management inside Java is little bit easier than ABAP. As far as I am concerned, it's a little bit easier than ABAP. However, we need to understand the basic concept behind this memory management, because once you start configuring the system and your applications are going to keep increasing, then you need to understand what is the concept behind this memory management. Before we get into this space management, there is memory management in SAP for this Java virtual memory for the VM. These are mainly divided into three different areas, which is called young generation and tenured generation and permanent generation. This definition is between the generations are discussed in the coming slides. We will consider the common behavior between the generation while reserving the memory in this host. Basically, when you start up the virtual machine, the operating system allocate the system memory for each generation. In this initial allocation of the memory, which is called initial or initial size, and this allocated memory is administered internally by the VM itself. So once the initial space, this initial space has been used, then the VM allocate further operating system memory space to the maximum amount to the VM itself. So the VM automatically takes care of allocation of memory for Java applications. Okay, let me repeat it again. When you start up the VM, first it will allocate only this initial memory from the operating system. Okay, this we can specify it. We will come to that again. So when you start up the VM, it will initially start like this. Then once, let's assume your application already used up the initial memory and it needs additional memory, then it will allocate to the maximum memory, and the initial and maximum you can specify in your Java environment. So the Java VM itself will take care of this allocation. So in some cases that there is some application which was running and the deallocation of the particular memory is not happen, or let's say the application did not deallocate the memories, then there is something called garbage collector. The job of the garbage collector is like it goes and checks all the memory, whether it's being used by the application. If it is not used by the application, then it will deallocate, it will free the space. Yeah, it's a Java special agent which is called as garbage collector. So if you see here, we have the total allocated memory from the operating system. However, let's say there is an amount of memory which is reserved for the operating system by itself, and you will have some memory which is called virtual memory, which is still not allocated by the operating system. Okay. However, let's say Java's JVM takes the memory. Let's say if the operating system needs the memory back, then the JVM will give back this memory. It's internally managed by the VM itself. Now let us see how the memory allocation within VM itself. These three main part of VM is like young, turned and permanent generations. That's what we have seen. So we have young generation, or we can say old generation, or permanent generations. So what is young generation, what is old generation, what is permanent generation? This we need to understand. The object that has been newly created by an application are stored in the young generation. Okay, the object that was required by a longer period by the application are saved in the old generation, okay, or turned generation. The newer object, the time when it grows older, then it will become the older generation. That means it will become the turned generation, because you are keeping it for a longer time. Same, it's a similar concept as ABAP buffering, but it will be little bit different. We have a old generation and we have a young generation and old generation in order to differentiate. The reason is that the garbage collector will always go back to the old generation and start collecting the garbages. So we can identify it very clearly. The objects that are permanently required by VM, for example, such as classes, methods, these kind of objects are stored in the permanent generation. These objects are no longer required by application or automatic, and however, if these objects are no longer required by the application, then it will be automatically removed from the main memory, okay, by the garbage collector. Even though it is permanent, but it will be automatically removed from the main memory itself. So we already know how the initial memory is being allocated. Let's say this is the maximum size of initial memory which is allocated, whereas it will automatically keep some reserve. Whereas if you can see here, the new size is the actual size which will be used by the initial startup. Then once it is filled up, then we will take the XMS, which will have the total usable memory of old generation and young generation, and this is the old generation also, it will keep some reserved. Okay, and in the permanent one, which is anyway allocated to the VM, which will also have the maximum permanent size and the permanent size. It's the permanent size which will be used, and you will have a little bit reserved, then you will have the total maximum size. Okay, these are all the parameters which will be used to configure this memory allocation within the Java VM itself. Now let us have an overview of configuration tool. So if you see in the window, the left side of the configuration tool displays the structure of the cluster in global setting. In settings for individual cluster elements, the cluster elements are always assigned to an instance with an instance number. Yeah. The instance number also consists of the name of the dispatcher or the server process. As a guide, if there is no instance number dispatcher in the server, that means it's a global setting. Okay, so you can see it here. This dispatcher and this server have a instance number. Okay, if this is not there, then the dispatcher or the manager belongs to global setting. Okay. The parameter of the selected elements of displayed in the main window on the right side. This we already seen. And please remember, this is very important, that you can only use the configuration tool to change the parameter if the instance of SAP system, that is the SAP Java instance are stopped. Okay, so let's go to our system. Let's open our configuration tool, the config tool, C drive, USR SAP, SID, J2EE, config tool, then select config tool. Says, do you want to use the default setting? Yes. Then now it's connecting to the database. As we seen in the previous session, the database should be running. Okay, now it's connected to the server, connected to the database. Okay, now let's see if the setting of the VM virtual machines are maintained in the configuration tool. Okay, if you maintain the VM setting in the selected dispatcher server node, the runtime parameter are displayed in the general tab. For example, the server, then the runtime environment is displayed here. Okay, or let me select one service. So if we want to maintain these parameters in this config tool, we have to make sure that the Java is stopped. Okay, how do we stop the Java? So far what we have seen, to start and stop the entire ABAP system, that entire SAP. So how to stop the Java? Okay, for that, first what we need to do is we need to log into SAP system. This step is very important, please keep a note of it. So okay, in this SAP GUI, you type in the transaction code SMICM. This SMICM transaction code is for monitoring ICM process. We already know what is ICM process. So to stop the Java instance, we need to go to administration, then you go to Java cluster global, then you go to send hard shutdown. You say without restart, that means you don't want to restart, just say without restart. Now you can see the operation is executed successfully. Now the Java instance is down. Okay, now you go to our operating system, go start our J2E config tool. The config tool, we know already a couple of things, how to change parameters, and we have global parameter and instant parameter. Global parameter that affects all the instances, the instant parameter which will affect the specific instances. Okay, and how do we find out the parameters values of the specific instance? Let's say if you select this one, you can see the instance message server and bootstrap, where you can see the Java home. Yeah, this is the home directory of Java. If you wanted to change it, you can change it. Okay, so same like this, if you want to change the parameter for dispatcher, you simply open this, go to the dispatcher. Here also you can see the Java home, also you can see Java parameters, additional parameters what you like to see. You can see the minimum size and the maximum size and the XMS, and all these parameters are already available. If you wanted to change it, you can change it here. Okay, and if you want to change the heap size, for example, we can change it in the heap size here in here as well. And moreover, if you want to see the cluster node in the OS level, if you go here and if you go to ECC, then you go to instance, then you go to work. Here you can see the developer dispatcher. If you go to dev dispatcher, if you open this with the notepad, here if we search for, let's say, go to find cluster ID, you can see here this is the cluster ID of this particular Java instance. The cluster ID have like 00, that is the instance number, and this will be the cluster ID. Okay, you can find it from here. This is the developer dispatcher, and we also can find from J2EE cluster. Yes, here J2EE cluster. Then you have instance properties, where you can see the cluster ID. Here the cluster ID start from here. Here also you can specify the heap memory, the minimum and maximum memories, which is on the operating system level. Okay, and for example, if you go to config tool, where let's say we want to maintain some another parameters. Okay, let's assume that I want to maintain some another parameters. Then you can maintain it, let's say from some global settings. You wanted to change it, then you go to for example, we take one example, something called keep alive time. Let's say if you are using web browsers in our instance, how long you wanted to keep the web browser alive. Okay, it's called keep alive time. It's a parameter, same like parameter we have also in SAP GUI, that how long you want to keep the ideal user in the SAP GUI. After that it will automatically gives you the timeout. Okay, same like that we can also do it in the web browser in the Java system. So for that there is a parameter called keep alive time. It's a global parameter. So let's say, how do we change this one? If you go to global server configuration, then you go to services, and this is an HTTP service. So you go to, actually not a server configuration, it's a dispatcher configuration. Go to dispatcher, then you go to HTTP. Here you can see keep alive time. So if you wanted to change this one, let's say I wanted to change it to 20, you go to 20 and say set. Okay, then it will set this to 20, customer value, default value. If I want to restore the default value, I can simply say restore the default value. It will restore all the default values. Okay, so if I wanted to change it, you can select here, change it, and to set. So once you did the changes, then you need to apply the settings. Okay, by saving this one. Let's say if you say save, it will ask you, do you want the local setting need to be overwritten? If you say okay, it will overwrite. Okay, the changes will be saved, and it says in order to change, in order for the change take effect, please restart the cluster. Okay, fine. Now let's assume we did the changes whatever we want. Then you want to start the Java instance, then you need to go to administration again, then go to Java cluster, then you go to restart. Okay, when you say yes, then it will automatically restart the Java instance. Okay, that's the way how do we use the config tool. Okay, so we have seen how do we configure the config tool. So let's see, we use visual administrator. Visual administrator, we want to change the same configuration in visual administrator. Let's assume it like that. Is it possible? Okay, Let's go to our SAP system. Okay, and let's do the same thing. Let's stop the our Java environment. Go to SMICM. Go to administration. Go to cluster global. Then without restart. Now the system is down. Then we go to operating system. Now we need to start our visual administrator. So let's go to USR SAP. Go to USR SAP ECC. Then our instance. Then go to J2EE. Go to admin. Then let's go to Go and start the system. Let me connect to one of the connection. Let's say edit. Okay, this is J2E, the support number and default. Okay, fine. Let's connect to this one. Let's say connect. I'll put in the password. Connecting to ACC demo. You can see the toolbar running. Okay, now if you see, we have the server and dispatcher. Here you have same like our visual admin, same like our config tool. Here also you have global configuration and the cluster configuration. Right now we are in the cluster configuration. If you select this one, you have global configuration which has kernel and the services, okay, and the server. You have server and as well as the dispatcher. If you come to the cluster configuration, you have dispatcher as well as the server. Okay, now let's find out how do we change the HTTP keep alive. So in the cluster configuration, you go to dispatcher and go to the services, and here you can see HTTP provider. Okay, in the HTTP provider you can see the keep alive timeout. Okay, here same 15. If you wanted to change it here, you can change it here and say update, then it will update you, then you will save the changes. Then you need to, once you save the changes, of course you need to restart the system. You need to come here and say restart, say yes, then it will restart the Java. Then the system, the particular parameter what we have changed will be active. Okay, this is the way we can use the same, we can, for the same parameter we are actually able to use both the tools. Okay, and let's go back to our presentation. With this we are coming to the end of this session. Thank you very much for listening. I will see you in the next session. Bye bye.